Israel has continued to launch both ground and air attacks. Horrible images coming out of Gaza again. Horrible stories of premature babies that were left because they could not evacuate them properly from hospitals in the north. Images that are coming out of there and reports that are just horrific. The onslaught continues. The Biden administration still sort of maintaining that they don't have leverage with Israel to stop this campaign, despite the fact that the U.S. provides them with much of the weaponry that they're using.
You know, when you think of the term leverage, what do you think the lever tends to be, like specifically in these kinds of conversations? And I would say
goodwill.
Oh, yeah. Vibes.
Yeah.
Because the first thing that would come to mind would be the billions of dollars in money that we provide to that country on a yearly basis. And
that has no effect on any of this. That's a triviality. That's just a coincidence that exists. It has no bearing on the active bombing campaign.
Right. And the billions that we're potentially going to give them, although, I don't know, with this shift in rhetoric from the White House, maybe there's some movement on that front.
I doubt it. But here is, because there's an interesting sort of divide that seems to be existing here. You remember that in the early days, Blinken had tweeted out something to the effect of, calling for a ceasefire. And then that tweet was deleted when it became clear, like, oh, we're not supposed to do that. And there has obviously been dissent within the State Department. Here is essentially the nation's top military guy. I mean, he's actually the defense secretary, so technically still a civilian. But representing, and I think we've seen this with at least a significant amount of the diplomatic corps. This is, I don't know how else you would categorize it other than being, the military corps, because you're not going to hear active military speaking out. Here is Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin speaking at the Reagan Foundation in Simi Valley, California.
Frankly, Reagan would have been probably better on this than Biden's been so far.
I think so. I mean, it's also, I don't know, you can do apples to apples in terms of the timing, but nevertheless, this is about as clear a message as you could get from your one of the top cabinet members in the Biden administration, who is basically saying, from the context of my portfolio, which is, the military, what Israel is doing, and I don't think he's concerned terribly too much about the morality or whatever. It doesn't. He is assessing this from a military perspective. What Israel is doing is simply creating a Hamas of the future.
Israel is in a hard fight against a cruel enemy in one of the most densely populated areas on Earth. But democracies like ours are stronger and more secure when we uphold the law of war. So we will continue to press Israel to protect civilians and to ensure the robust flow of humanitarian aid.
Pause it for 1 second. And, I don't know how much time they think, but like democracies like us, it's unclear whether he's saying the United States is a democracy or Israel and us are democracies. And if Israel and us are democracies and the supposed international order is no war crimes, why is there daylight between what we're asking for and what apparently Israel's doing? I mean, I think it's just like important, like little breadcrumbs. That's all we're going to get out of this.
It's like, Israel, remember, your branding is that you're a democracy. So if you want to follow that, you might want to just like put some lipstick on this pig.
And let's be clear. I'm not suggesting that the U.S. does not engage in war crimes. But the point being is that the notion, and particularly this was promulgated in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the notion of a international rules-based order that we were promoting, it's really hard for us to promote that when we're giving weaponry to a country that is completely trampling all over that. But continue.
First and foremost, that's the right thing to do. But it's also good strategy. You know, I learned a thing or two about urban warfare from my time fighting in Iraq and leading the campaign to defeat ISIS. Like Hamas, ISIS was deeply embedded in urban areas. And the international coalition against ISIS worked hard to protect civilians and create humanitarian corridors, even during the toughest battles. And so the lesson is not that you can win in urban warfare by protecting civilians. The lesson is that you can only win in urban warfare by protecting civilians. You see, in this kind of a fight, the center of gravity is the civilian population. And if you drive them into the arms of the enemy, you replace a tactical victory with a strategic defeat. So I have repeatedly made clear to Israel's leaders that protecting Palestinian civilians in Gaza is both a moral responsibility and a strategic imperative. And so I personally pushed Israeli leaders to avoid civilian casualties and to shun irresponsible rhetoric and to prevent violence by settlers in the West Bank and to dramatically expand access to humanitarian aid. This week, a U.S.
I mean, this sounds like a guy who just wants to say, like, I just want you to know, you can't blame me.
Oh, well, they're washing their hands of it.
But I wonder how much this is also not only a message to Israel, but to the administration.
Yeah.
Like, you're not, like, when this all falls apart, because it seems to me that Austin would say in a more private context, they lost the strategic battle.
Yes.
Or that it's quite clear that's not the strategic battle. You know, the assumption here is they're going to get rid of Hamas, or that's the attempt to win this war over Hamas. But it could very well be that the Israeli campaign is as much about trying to drive Palestinians out of Gaza. I don't know where they think they're supposed to be going.
Well,
but
I mean,
as anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the AM Quickie this morning, Jacob Silverman had this that I didn't see before, that Kamala Harris met with Sisi, Egypt's president. And according to the White House press release, Harris reiterated the administration's opposition to the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. This is in the release. The quote is, "Under no circumstances will the United States permit the forced relocation of Palestinians from Gaza or the West Bank, the besiegement of Gaza, or the redrawing of the borders of Gaza." And that is notable because that means that the administration is beginning to feel that that is the objective of the Israeli government, which, by the way, we on this program have been saying for weeks.
There was a report of that the Israeli government, or the war count, whatever, the administration in Israel, the Netanyahu government, was talking about the idea of thinning the population in Gaza. Mm-hmm. And this was floated. Daniel Seidman, who I follow on Twitter, who was an Israeli lawyer who's argued in front of the Supreme Court on behalf of Palestinian issues and whatnot, suggests that the reason why we hear a leak like that is for Netanyahu to be able to signal to the American government that they need to step in and basically say, you can't do that. And in other words, this is traditionally the way that the U.S. played its role with the Israeli government, particularly in the late 90s and through the 90s. And really, in many respects, prior to basically the Bush administration, was the U.S. was used to provide political cover for Israeli prime ministers who were trying to fend off their most right-wing of impulses within their government or their country. And with the Bush administration, they stopped doing this. And that's what happened when you started to see those elections were sort of forced on Gaza as much by the United States as by the Israelis. And when the U.S. was no longer there to play that role, the worst impulses of Israel carried the day. He suspected that the intention was that Netanyahu, this is Seidman, leaked his intentions so that, or he was referring to an earlier incident, but he believes that he can get the domestic political benefits of the provocation, but not have to actually have the provocation. He referred to, at least in an earlier instance, he didn't want to stop. He wanted to be stopped. That was a different decision about Netanyahu was making 10 years ago about the ramp to the Al-Aqsa Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
But is that the same guy that we're dealing with right now? I mean, the question is Netanyahu is much more cornered politically. He sees basically one way out, and that is forward with a continued military operation.
Well, I think he'll continue to do that, but not necessarily seek. But the
and Smotrich is in his cabinet now, and Ben Gvir. These folks are the extreme of the extreme.
I agree. But the point being that if this dynamic does exist, then there's also puts that much more onus on the U.S. to play that role in the context of a ceasefire, even if at that point the Israelis don't want it. We'll obviously get more into this later in the program.